Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
31 individual drivers across all cab companies were charged with 34 sexual offences in 2016. Charged, not necessarily convicted. 3 of them were reported to have been unlicensed drivers, and the remainder were private hire cars. None were London black cab drivers. Of the 25 minicab drivers charged, 13, that's more than half, worked for Uber, which is currently battling to win its licence back from TfL. So it is demonstrably less safe than other modes of travel, most pertinently the black cab. Okay, change. It doesn't matter that in London you're demonstrably less safe in one of these vehicles, and in the world at large, your details, if they are stolen, they won't tell you. They'll try and keep it secret for as long as they can. And yet, because it's cheap, I just don't think it's going to matter, ever. I don't know what that says about us, but it's... I'll shut up now and start listening. Wayne's in Liverpool. Wayne, what would you like to say?
James, how you doing?
I'm all good.
I've never listened to LBC other than the last 20 minutes. I thought I'd switch on this morning for a bit of a change. I'm a new Uber driver.
You can't do this. You've got to wait at least 2 years before you're allowed to ring in. 20 minutes and you're on the line already. Flipping scousers, honestly. You just can't get a word in edgeways, can you?
Isn't it?
Go on.
So, listen, I didn't hear your full argument. The 2 points you've just made there. First about the hacking, it's happened. You can't get away from it. I've already discussed it with some of my customers this morning.
Yes.
And I think it will affect trade. But as you've already said, the chief exec's moved on. Whoever what that was under, they've now gone and they've got somebody else in charge. They should have come out with it. The fact that they chose to pay up, I don't think was a very good move. But that happens. It happened to, I'm not going to mention other company names, but it's happened to big consumers of data, companies who hold a lot of data on, to internet service providers recently, etc. On the safety issue, I take real offence at that, because I've gone through every check that any of the black cab drivers in London have had to do, or any private hire company, TRB checks, medical checks, everything, to prove that on the day that I was tested, I was a safe driver. Now, I was in the forces for 10 years, and in that time, if you've got any workforce, 50,000, 100,000, etc., a percentage of them will be bad people. There were people I stayed with who were kicked out for doing drugs, who were kicked out...
I appreciate that. Just to counter briefly, because you shouldn't take personal offence at this, and because you're not one of the people involved, but the bottom line is that of these charges that were brought in 2016, 34 individual cases, 34 individual offences, not one of them involved a black cab driver. So I appreciate it.
I'd like to know what the percentages of Uber drivers against black cab drivers.
No, there were no black cab drivers.
No, I mean percentage of workforce, should we say. I don't know how many black cab drivers there are in London as opposed to...
I haven't got it off the top of my head, but there's 25 individual minicab drivers charged, 13 were working for Uber. But it doesn't... I mean, crikey, I'm the last journalist on the planet who suggests that because you find one bad apple, you should castigate the whole barrel. I understand you recently been made redundant. This is a great... Yeah. Or at least a convenient way to get in the game and to keep...
I get back into the job market. This has been after I got my cab licence while I was at uni. Kept it up over the years, done the CRB checks every year just to make sure I was still current. Never thought I'd need it. And then 2 weeks ago, made redundant on a Friday, meant that I could go and drive for Uber on a Monday morning.
Done me like a kipper. I'm not going to have an argument with you, am I? One of my favourite tweeters is unhappy with me today. Your allegation, writes Incorrigible FCA, that people should be afraid of travelling in an Uber because of sexual assaults is hyperbolic and likely to spread unnecessary fear. You should do the honourable thing and correct this error. I don't know that I've made an error. I did stress that my wife happily takes them.
Last week, Transport for London announced that it would not be renewing Uber's licence to operate in London. Uber has opened up the market for being driven around. From the customer's point of view, you install an app on your phone and you can quickly and cheaply book drivers with very little hassle. Now, there's a lot going on behind TfL's decision, and we'll leave the pros and cons of it to others. Instead, we wanted to focus on a very particular claim that's been circulating, about which several loyal listeners have been asking. It concerns allegations of sexual assaults by Uber drivers.
Now that Uber may have its licence revoked in London, is there evidence that it's more dangerous to get an Uber than a black cab or a minicab?
Existing taxi drivers have suggested that there have been more cases of rape. Is it actually more dangerous to travel by Uber? And if so, is the increased risk significant?
Last year, the Licensed Taxi Drivers Association, it represents many black cab drivers, put a billboard up in and around London.
Last year, there were 154 rapes and sexual assaults by minicab drivers in London. At least 32 of these were Uber drivers. Don't take a risk with a minicab, only use a black cab.
Now, of course, black cab drivers would say that, wouldn't they? But the numbers seem solid enough. They came from a Freedom of Information request made to the Metropolitan Police in February last year and cover allegations of rape and sexual assault between February 2015 and February 2016. The Metropolitan Police replied, stating that for that time period, 154 allegations of rape or sexual assault had been made where the suspect was alleged to have been a taxi driver. 32 of the allegations stated that the suspect was an Uber driver. But hang on, let's hear that billboard claim again.
Last year, there were 154 rapes and sexual assaults by minicab drivers in London. At least 32 of these were Uber drivers. Don't take a risk with a minicab, only use a black cab.
But the Metropolitan Police were quite clear that the 154 allegations covered all sorts of private hire drivers, including black cab drivers. Transport for London, whose logo appeared on this billboard, were very unhappy, stating,
"The statistic used is not an accurate or faithful reflection of the information provided by the police. We are taking appropriate steps to remove the posters."
By the way, we agree. It's a misuse of statistics. So the Licensed Taxi Drivers Association replaced that billboard with another one.
Last year, there were 32 allegations of sexual assault made against Uber drivers. Why up your risk with a minicab?
But are minicabs or Uber rides more dangerous? There's no evidence of that in the data we've looked at so far, so we decided to do our own investigations. We know that between February 2015 and February 2016, 154 allegations of sexual assault were made against taxi drivers of all stripes, and that 32 of them involved Uber. That's just over 20%. Is that disproportionately high or disproportionately low? According to TfL, 2 to 3 million journeys are taken each week in taxis and private hire vehicles, including Uber, in London, which suggests, by the way, that a sexual assault on such a journey is roughly a 1 in a million event. Of these 2 to 3 million weekly journeys, Uber says they now do more than 1 million, so at least a third. And they said the same thing to the Guardian newspaper in March 2016. Now, it's possible that the figure was lower in 2015, the period covered by the Freedom of Information request. Uber had been growing quite quickly at the time. So, Uber drivers now seem to conduct more than a third of all taxis and private hire journeys in London. In 2015, they seem to be associated with just over 1/5 of allegations of sexual assault. The exact details aren't clear, and we wish Uber had been more willing to share their data with us about the number of journeys in 2015. What a surprise that they were so secretive. We might also wish that TfL had published the data. But certainly there's no reason, in the statistics that we have, to believe that Uber drivers are any more dangerous than any other kind of cab driver. TfL track the annual number of sexual offences committed by licensed taxi or private hire drivers and bogus drivers. These numbers have been recorded by the Metropolitan Police and the City of London Police since 2002. They haven't really changed much over time. In 2015, there were 136 reports of rape or sexual assault. In 2009, 3 years before Uber started operating in London, the number was also 136. There's always a risk when you get in a black cab or private hire car, but relative to the 100 million odd journeys each year, the risk needs to be put into perspective. And we've seen no evidence that the risk increases when an Uber driver is responsible for your journey.